Hey booktube, welcome to my June reading wrap up. I don't know what all this was. Yeah, welcome to the season of failure, at least for me. I guess something about the sun and the hot weather doesn't agree with my brain because I only read 2 books this month. Like this whole month. Who am I? This is probably like less than 1,000 pages, I'm not entirely sure. But like whichever way you look at it, it's 2 books. So, you know, strap in for a wild ride of, you know, low standards and severe mediocrity. AKA my channel. Okay, so the first book that I read this month, and I do have like a little like vloggy style thing of me reading this book, and that book was The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. So this book is a collection of short stories that I think are like prequels that set up the rest of the books in this series. And so this is the first book in the Witcher series of books, which is the series of books that inspired the series of video games by the same name. I initially tried to read this a while ago, several months ago, and I DNF'd it because it's not that the story itself was that bad, it's just that I really didn't like a lot of the sort of points of view that the author was putting into the text, mostly to do with women. And a lot of the writing style, it is a translation from Polish, so I'm kind of trying to be like a little bit lenient with it here, but it is a bit clunky, it's very matter-of-fact, it's very like cause and then effect and then cause and then effect, and then that's it. There's never really much variation with things like sentence structure, and a whole bunch of this is just dialogue, but not very riveting dialogue. It tends to be like really, I don't know, expository dialogue. I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like one person will be talking and they will maybe introduce themselves or say a little bit, and then the person will say something like, oh, sit down in that chair, oh, not that chair, sit down in this other chair, oh, I see you find this chair very comfortable. And like they describe what other people are doing in the scene by other people in the scene who are already talking, just sort of narrating through what's going on. It's really weird because I've never done that in my entire life, and I don't know anybody else who like commentates on other people's actions as and when they do them in real time. It's very strange and it was a bit jarring for me. Things I did like about this book, I thought that the world building was really good. It feels very natural, like you don't really feel like it's a big or difficult world to get on with. A lot of people in this world just don't know a lot about the nature of the world themselves. They don't know a lot about creatures and magic, so you're kind of in the same boat as the majority of this world's inhabitants, which kind of works for some of the exposition. So the Witcher or one of his companions might be explaining something to somebody else about how something works, and so it feels a bit more natural to be led into it that way. And I really did like a lot of the way that the world building occurred. Most fantasies kind of like very grandiose. This felt very mundane, but not in a bad way. It also felt very much more like folklore rather than like this big epic grand scale adventure. It just felt more like I was delving into little bits of folklore here and there for like various like Western European like monsters and beasties and all sorts of things, and it was just, I don't know, it was kind of refreshing to have like this small scale fantasy. It just kind of sucks for me that it didn't really follow through with like the major overarching plot of the story. I guess the fact that the prose itself was kind of clunky and it didn't really flow very well. There are some very good descriptions in here, like it's not that it's poorly written, but I think it is one of the side effects of having a translated work is that you tend to get, I guess, the sentence structure that is natural or common in that foreign language, and I'm assuming that Polish has this very particular way of structuring sentences which is different to English, and so this is more like a direct translation. So as a native English speaker, this didn't really feel like a very natural way of writing or speaking, at least for me, so it's not really something that I can like knowingly blame the author for, but like this is the only version, this is the only like format of this book that I can actually read it in, and so I still have to judge it like as it is, and I didn't like the writing style. I'm actually not really going to go into a lot of the things I think about the writer. I go into more detail in like my video that I did on this book, but he doesn't write women very good. I don't really know how to say it. I don't really think he knows that women are people. Like, there's not really much of a way for me to say that. There's only like a couple female characters in there, and they all fall into, I don't know, like just very clear stereotypes. So yeah, all of that is why I rated this book in the end 2 stars, and I am kind of like toying with the idea of maybe sometime in the future, maybe the distant future, picking up the rest of this series, because again, this was like a series of short stories, and I know that that's not always like the best way to get into like a series of books, and I know some people have enjoyed these, but I personally just did not see it. So I'm thinking of giving it another chance, but then that would be the last chance. So the second and final book that I read this month was The Fate of the Tearling by Erica Johansson. I have so much to say about this book, and I really don't think I can say it all here. To cut a long story short, I read the first book when it first came out and I loved it. I thought it was great. I went on to book 2. Book 2 is just one of the worst books I've read in a really long time. It was just really crap, and I have a whole video of me just basically ripping on the second book because it has ultimate middle book syndrome, like to the nth degree. It was insane how bad this book was in comparison to the first book. So when I went into the third and final installment in this series, I was just a little bit nervous, to say the least, because I'd loved the first book so much and I hated the second book so much. So I was just kind of waiting to see like which side of the tracks I would fall. Like, will I like this series overall, or will I hate this series overall? And I kind of just really wanted to know like where I would stand when all is said and done. So first thing to note, I did like this book a lot more than the second one. That's not a very difficult thing to achieve. That's not a very difficult place for this book to be in. I didn't like it as much as the first book, but I really did think it improved massively from the mistakes of the second book. I mean, speaking of mistakes, one of the mistakes of the second book was that there were typos and errors and continuity things all throughout the book. Like, nobody had checked it or edited it, and there were just like just really bad typos. And this book suffers from the same thing, I'll be honest. I know that's a really picky thing, but sometimes it was as serious as characters' names or professions being like swapped or mistaken, and I'm thinking, is this from like an early draft or something? Like, what's going on? It's like little grammatical errors, like, you know, if you're, I don't know, your hands are bound. In present tense, you know, you would bind your hands. But in this way, like, I don't know if this is some really like janky regional American English or something, but like, she will use the word bounded as in like, that's the past tense of the word bound, as in like to leap, and bound like to run and jump, not to tie together, which is to bind. And you know, bounded is not the past tense of bind. And it's little things like that where, like, you know, Microsoft Word isn't going to put a little red squiggle under there to let you know that you've used the wrong word, because it is another word. But it's just like, how, like, just come on. Like, parts of this are really bad. There's the main character is called Kelsey, but she's occasionally seeing things from the perspective of another character whose name is Katie, and there's one point where Kelsey is speaking but the text refers to her as Katie, and I'm like, Katie's not in this scene. So I'm sure the author probably just got mixed up, but the fact that nobody caught it, it's like, was this book ever edited? Did anybody do like a second pass of this whole thing? There's another part where one character is a gate guard, and he's off on like a mission with 2 Queen's Guards, and the gate guard refers to the 2 other men in his own like inner monologue as those 2 gate guards. And I'm like, no, you're the gate guard. They're Queen's Guards. They're not gate guards. There are no other gate guards. There is only you. Just like, how do these things end up in the book? Essentially, kind of janky writing, absent editing. No editing whatsoever, as far as I can tell. Without really spoiling anything, the things that the book improved on were that I felt like in the second book there were no, I kind of want to say, like, not a lot of action, not a lot of agency from any of the characters. Things would happen off screen and we would just hear about them, whereas I feel in this you actually see characters doing things and having those conversations and making those decisions and taking those actions, and it's just, you know, funnily enough, it's so much more entertaining in a book to read about things happening than to read about them just being referred to, you know, in like a throwback line. Like, obviously, that's a big improvement. I got to see so much more of my favourite character. My favourite character is the Mace, because we all know I love damaged old men. And to be honest, I wasn't really sure exactly where his character arc was going in this. I'll get to that in a minute. I'll get to all the character arcs in a minute. But yeah, it was really refreshing to be able to pick up and like see more of the characters that had just sort of been absent through most of the second book. So the events were so much more interesting, and there's a lot of, again, not really spoiling anything, but there's a lot of backstory about like the origins of like the main villain in this series, and that was so interesting. Initially it was a bit like dull, but it did pick up eventually, and I thought that the characterization of the villain and who they were like before all this crap started, like who they were at the beginning, was so interesting, and I thought that that was really well done. I feel like, honestly, the best way I can put this is that this character, how they are presented in like this almost origin story, it's what the Darkling wants to be, and that's kind of like the most concise way I can put it. If you think of that very dark, charismatic, extremely manipulative, just very cruel sort of person, honestly, it did it really well. I really loved the characterization of the villain, because I hated them. There were so many lines that they said, and I just felt like the character's annoyance. I felt their rage about, you know, just how slimy and manipulative this character was being, like with their lines and like their, I don't know. Yeah, I just felt like Erika Johansen did a fantastic job of characterizing this villain in a way that made them, I don't know, charismatic, enigmatic, understandable, and interesting, but not sympathetic. Although, like, I will say, the payoff and like the utilization of everything that was built up was just the worst. I can't spoil the ending for you, but I really want to, because honestly, I just want to tell you, just read the first book and then skip the second book and then just read everything but the last like chapter of this, because how do I say this? I've never been more dissatisfied with the ending of a book in my entire life. Just ever in my entire life have I ever been so, I don't know, just like viscerally, like just really annoyed by just how dissatisfying the ending to this book was. It was so frustrating, and it was just so, it was just a paltry little ending for a story that is like I took my time to read this. I tried my best to get invested with a lot of characters, and like I wanted to know what the resolution for some of them would be. There was some really like, there were some big implications towards the end of the book, and I feel like there almost was no resolution. I feel like it was just a whole load of nothing. It was just a whole load of, it's almost like the last page should have just been that shrug emoji, and just, you might as well not have even bothered to read any of these books, because that more or less was the ending. It was just atrocious. It was just like, I hated it so much. It was, how do I describe the exact feeling? You know, like if you drop your phone and you pick it up and the phone screen is cracked, that exact feeling that you feel in that moment of just like, that exact feeling is what the last chapter felt like. Like the whole time I was reading it, and for several hours afterwards, I just had this horrible feeling of like it's ruined. It's just, it was just completely ruined. It's just so frustrating, so dissatisfying, and I hated this ending. Like, I really wanted to like this book. If things were looking up, I was actually enjoying the story. Like, I still had some issues with it, the grammar and like the spelling, you know, the editing, still crap, but as a book, it was getting towards being how that first book was in the series, where I actually cared about the characters and I wanted to know more, and I was actually enjoying reading like a huge chunk of this book, and then the end just came in like, no. So this got 2 stars. Reading the ending almost has exactly the same effect as never reading the last chapter. If you read it, you'll probably understand, and I just feel like it was such a cop-out. I just feel like it was such a crap way to try and end the series, because so much was left unsaid, so much was left undone, and everything that I had actually been interested in, all the stories and all the character arcs, and like, you know, I wanted to see those threads come together and have a resolution, and just the whole nature of the ending just meant that there was no resolution. Yeah, I honestly can't believe that the whole reason I read this book was to say that I'd finished the series and got the resolutions, and the author still didn't let me have that. She won't let me rest. So yeah, I'm never going to read another book by this author. I don't know if she's ever going to write anything else. Like, I think this was her first series, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was her last series. Because I feel like at the end she just got bored and was just like, yeah, I don't want to write this anymore. And it just really shows. Like, it just really shows. It was crap. I realise I'm ranting, I realise I'm babbling, but it was so crap. So yeah, there you go. These are the 2 books that I read this month. I had a really bad month, guys. Both of the books are 2 stars, and you know, I almost DNF'd this one before, and I almost DNF'd this series before, and I'm just having a really bad month, guys. I'm sure things will improve because like Medieval-a-thon is coming soon, and I think there's like the reading rush at the end of this month, so there's good things to come, you know? I just did a really big book haul, so I'm sure I can find something better to read. But man, was this depressing or what? This sucks. This is my worst wrap-up ever. So god, yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this. If you enjoy, like, you know, salt-fueled rage and disappointment and, you know, having low expectations, then do check out the rest of my channel. But yeah, I kind of don't really know where I can go after this. Surely it can only get better from here. Right? So yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Hopefully I will see you in another video. So until then, peace out, BookTube.